tonight on the debate. Hosni Mubarak in trial in court for the second time today. He briefly confirmed who he was. Not much more was said. He was still on that hospital bed, though. We're discussing tonight the significance of this trial and which way it might go. We're joined by two more guests in Boston. Ashraf Hegazi is from the Kennedy School's Belfer Centre for Science and International Affairs. Good evening to you. And in Cairo, Heba Fatma Moraef is an Egypt specialist at Human Rights Watch in Cairo. I'll start with you, Heba, if I may. Before the break, we were just discussing whether or not... No, apologies, technical difficulties. We can't speak to Heba for the moment. So, Ashraf, I'll go to you. Ashraf Hegazi, we were just discussing the penalty facing Mubarak and whether or not he should indeed face the death penalty. Your views on that?
I think he'll face the death penalty. And if he's found guilty, they might start with the death penalty. But usually for someone of his age and anyone with health issues, they reduce that to life in prison or some other prison sentence. So I suspect that that's probably where it will end up. So even though he is eligible for the death penalty and normally would get the death penalty if he is convicted, he will probably end up with a reduced sentence.
Interesting you should say that. Some of our other guests tonight believe that Mubarak might be acquitted of all the charges against him.
No, I don't think there's any real chance of that. I think that, especially because there are probably thousands of potential cases that could have been brought against him, but the Attorney General's office chose these three cases, and I think they would not have done that unless they were convinced that they had a solid case against him, and they could really prove all these allegations.
Now, the defence is calling for Mohammed Tantawi, who's the head of the military government right now. He's also been an army chief for many, many years under Mubarak. His testimony could prove explosive if we hear it.
Yeah, I really doubt that we will see him speak. And certainly he would not have spoken if this had continued to be broadcast live. It's possible that now that the case will continue behind closed doors, that he might give some sort of testimony. But I think if, even if his words were to be made public later, I think he will use his executive privilege or the equivalent of executive privilege to keep from providing explosive testimony.
Professor Shalakani, if I could get your reaction to some of that, what are your thoughts on whether or not we might see General Tantawi in court?
Well, first of all, the judge has to entertain Mubarak's attorney's demand for Judge Tantawi to be heard before court, and that decision rests in the hands of the judge. And if the judge decides no, that is unnecessary, then Tantawi will not be called in. On the possibility of Mubarak getting acquitted, I fear I may have been misunderstood. I didn't mean that he's going to get acquitted on all charges. What I mean, though, is that the Attorney General's office has created a docket of charges in which it is clearly hedging some charges on which he will, I think, get acquitted, with other charges that he'll be found guilty of. And convicting him of incitement to murder, to my mind, will be one of the more difficult ones to find him guilty on, so that you are left in the end with, again, minor corruption charges in order to placate the public. More specifically, the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General specifically, whose office drafted this docket of charges, is himself a Mubarak appointee. He cannot be removed because Attorney Generals are appointed until they reach 74, I believe now. But that Attorney General should have had enough political delicateness to actually resign after Mubarak's removal. The fact that he remains as a Mubarak appointee and is the man responsible for drafting this docket is, to my mind, another cause for concern.
All right. Heba Moraef from Human Rights Watch is with us now from Cairo, I believe. Heba, are you confident that this trial will be carried out in a fair and transparent manner?
I think human rights organizations will rarely express confidence in advance because what we're always concerned about is to actually monitor the procedures of every session.
What you've seen so
and this is
far.
what we're going to do with this trial. From what we've seen so far, I think we don't have any major concerns in terms of how the judge has handled the procedural requests from the defense and the lawyers of victims who are civil parties to the case. We are obviously on principle against the accused being kept in a cage. This is a structural problem with all Egyptian courts because it goes against the presumption of innocence from our perspective. And we have broader concerns, and this is why we're going to be monitoring this trial very closely. We have broader concerns about the very short period of the investigation that took place, which will obviously then reflect on the quality of the evidence, because we think it will be very difficult politically to acquit Mubarak or any of the other senior security officials of many of these charges. So this is why we're going to want to monitor this trial very closely.
Do you think he should be tried for other offences allegedly committed during his reign?
Well, I think it's regrettable that Mubarak is being tried only for these very few days in January of this year. These were indeed the gravest abuses that anyone has experienced, because at no other previous occasion had live gunfire been used against unarmed protesters, and at no other occasion had we had more than 800 people killed in the space of days. However, for me, the heavier legacy of Mubarak's reign is the 30 years of abusive practices by his police services, the repression that his police state solidified. In his time, torture became systematic, not only in political cases, but also in your average criminal case. It became a tool that the average police officer in a police station would use as an investigation. And ultimately, Mubarak and the former Minister of Interior are responsible for the policies that kept these practices in place. So I regret the fact not only that Mubarak is not being tried for these greater crimes from my perspective, but also because there is no process as yet. There is no process of transitional justice in Egypt that is trying to expose this very heavy legacy, because that would be one step forward towards ensuring that these abuses will not reoccur, and we don't have that assurance yet.
Moira.
Well, I would say I would go further than Hiba. Hiba's younger than I am, therefore I have a longer view. To me, it's not a matter of the 30 years of reign of Mubarak. It's a matter of a regime. The regime started some 59 years ago. And we may, all of us of my generation, remember that we couldn't talk in our own houses for fear of somebody reporting us to Nasser's apparatus. So I think, yes, it is insufficient, but I think it is a first step. And I think we all will wake up to ask where our beloved ones have gone. At some point of time, you will see a multiplication of these trials with us asking, where are the people gone? Those who were imprisoned, where were the charges? Why? I think it's just a Pandora box opening.
So you would rather have a trial that possibly, potentially went on for many, many years, as long as it got to the root of
No.
like a truth and reconciliation.
No, for this trial, I'd rather have it happen quickly.
Right, on the protesters, on the issue of protesters.
But I think there should be many trials. There should be trials opening in order to write history for these 60 years, to know who did what.
What about the point that Christopher made, that the military council is just not going to let that happen because it would implicate so many of them as well?
Unfortunately, the ministry, the SCAF has not had much of a choice. They have been cornered by the street. They have had to do this trial. They didn't want to do it. They had to do it at some point of time. What's happening now, I think, is a crackdown and a closure of the information. We had Tahrir Square emptied of protestants. We now have the cameras inside the courtroom absent. We will again be in a closed circle where things will be decided internally. This is my fear. And this is what we need to be very careful that it doesn't happen.
Is that a legitimate fear, Ashraf Hegazi?
It is, but I think there's also a significant role here for the Attorney General's office, but also independent investigations, especially by the media. As the country becomes more and more democratic and we see more freedoms available, I think there will be an opportunity for a lot of organizations, whether they be the media, Human Rights Watch, or other independent organizations, to conduct their own investigations. And that is, I think, going to address the very good points that Morad brings up, which is that this isn't about the couple of weeks in January. It isn't about a villa that Mubarak is implicated in in buying or selling and exchanging his influence for. This is about decades of abuse, and there are so many cases that we really can't try them in court right now. And certainly, I don't think they need to be tried during the period that SCAF is in power, because I agree that SCAF will put a lot of political pressure to keep some of those cases under wraps. And they don't have to be tried in the context of Hosni Mubarak's trial. But they do have to be investigated. There's a lot of truth that's been hidden for decades, and that truth has to come out. So I think that over the next several years, we will see some of this truth come out, but I think it will come out through non-governmental organizations doing the investigative work.
Do you think that's something we might see over the next few months, years in Egypt?
I understand that the Egyptians are very proud, and with good reason, and that they don't want to look at South African models and other truth and reconciliation models, but that in fact is what Egypt needs. That's what any country needs after almost 60 years of tyrannical dictatorships. It's very hard to overcome that. What people want in any society after these kinds of traumas, more than anything else, is not in fact revenge. A lot of this looks like revenge. What they really want is what Myra's talking about. They want to know the truth. They want to know what really happened. What we see now is a process that's a legal framework for revenge or not revenge against Hosni Mubarak. The question is, where is that process going to come from for a much broader exposition of the truth? And whether private organizations or independent organizations, non-state organizations, will have the power to bring that out, I hope that's true, but I doubt it.
I would add a word to that. I will go further and say foreign organizations will always be accused of paying somebody. We've seen that lately with the 6th of April. They have been accused of receiving money from foreign countries.
Yeah.
It's very easy to say that the money you are giving me, I'm giving because I want to help the maimed and the killed, is some sort of bribery.
Sure, and one of the political frameworks that's developing here, we don't know if it'll come to fruition, is a kind of a coalition between the Islamist forces, between the Ikhwan, the Muslim Brotherhood, and the military. And basically, I scratch your back, you scratch mine. So let's say that there are democratic elections and the Muslim Brotherhood wins big and has a pact with the military, basically to keep covered up what the military wants covered up. That's the price of victory. That's not an inconceivable scenario. In fact, it may be the most likely scenario, in which case the kind of truth and reconciliation and sense of justice that Myra is talking about will never happen.
Professor Shalakani, a rather bleak outlook there. Do you think that there's a risk that might happen in Egypt now, unless there is a proper independent committee set up to investigate not just what Mubarak did, but all of everything that happened during his reign?
I agree completely, yes. I mean, it is a bleak prospect, but it's actually, it's very plausible, yes. Indeed, ever since we were plunged into the constitutional amendments referendum back in March, this has been a scenario on the table, that what is happening before us is a desire for pressing the fast-forward button on everything, whether it's the trials or it's going to draft a new constitution or getting into elections, on the understanding that the main people who would benefit from pushing the fast-forward button on our political life after a revolution are fundamentally either the remnants of the NDP, the past ruling party, or the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the most organized on the streets, and that the price of that will be a closing of files for the SCAF. That the implication in which, the army in Egypt is a black hole. We know nothing about it. We know nothing in any clear, dependable numbers about its role in the economy and so on. And so, yeah, I'm afraid yes.
And what can people in Egypt do to prevent this happening, Ashraf Hegazi?
Well, I do want to provide a more optimistic outlook. I think that the long term, the long-term outlook for Egypt is much more positive than this. Frankly, people saw that they can topple one of the strongest men in the Arab world in 18 days. They are not going to forget that. They're not going to forget the people power that accomplished that and that continues to accomplish great things for the country that previous generations didn't imagine could ever be done. So yes, I see attempts by establishment forces and potentially by the Muslim Brotherhood or other major Islamist organizations to maintain control or come into power. And their interests might be overlapping in the short term. But I think long term, I can't see the Muslim Brotherhood, especially not the rank and file of the Brotherhood, being in cahoots with the military to cover things up. And ultimately, I think that once we have truly fair elections, especially of the executive branch, and I do believe we will reach that stage, we will have an independent executive who will very much be interested in controlling, at the very least, the kind of corruption that had happened in the past. And so I think to imagine that the Brotherhood and the military will suddenly become such strong power centers that they will be able to maintain the kind of corruption that happened in the past is a bit far-fetched. I don't think people will stand for it, and I don't think an independent executive will stand for it.
All right. So, Myra, although millions of Egyptians thought they'd never see Mubarak in court, yourself included, you never thought that would happen. Exactly. From what I'm hearing here, it seems that this is really just a first step if Egypt is to move forward from its autocratic past into a democratic new age.
It should be. It should be. Well, I hope Mr. Hegazi is right. I would love that to happen, but I'm not sure today we're in this prospect. Don't forget what happened on the 23rd of July, whereby the Ikhwan said that they would demonstrate in a unified manner with the liberals. The liberals went to Tahrir with them, and all of a sudden they discovered it was fully, but everywhere, Islamic propaganda, and they had to leave the square. This is when they trusted the Ikhwan. Can we still trust the Ikhwan in future?
We'll have to wait and see. We're going to have to leave it there on that note, I'm afraid. Myra Madi Daridan, Christopher Dickey, Professor Amra Shalakani, Ashraf Hegazi, and Heba Fatma Moreya. Thank you very much indeed to you all for joining me. Thanks to you for watching. That's it for tonight's debate. I'll be back with another subject at the same time tomorrow. Marcus is next with The Business. This is France 24.
A hero to many in Malaysia, the Philippines and Indonesia, Osama bin Laden is being mourned. All over Southeast Asia, Islamic activists are swearing vengeance. As the Islamic holy war spreads worldwide, they're taking up the baton from the first generation of Asian jihadists, many of whom are now in jail. From the jungles of the Philippines to the jails of Indonesia, France 24 followed the trail of Al-Qaeda's Asian network to Abbottabad in Pakistan, where bin Laden was killed. Some of them agreed to be interviewed for the first time. Don't miss this exclusive report. Tomorrow, 1:40 p.m. Paris time on France 24. Every day on France 24, a daily check of the world of sports. With your latest results, highlights and news. Join us for Sports Magazine today. 7:10 p.m. Paris time on France 24. The wide world of the web comes unleashed. Every day, we bring you the latest internet buzz, featuring blogs, trendy websites and forums. Don't miss Web News, Monday to Friday, 6:50 a.m. Paris time on France 24.